to solve our domestic discussions. I am asking you to leave a light on so that we can find our way home.
The experience of the last 3.5 years has raised big questions about how we see ourselves as a country and our place in the world. It has raised questions about our voice and our democracy and about our future. What kind of country and society do we want to be? At the heart of these questions is a belief held by almost everyone in Scotland that we are a nation, no better or worse than any other, but an equal nation. And as a nation, our future, whatever we choose that to be, must be in the hands of the people who live here. We can choose to stay part of the Westminster Union, or we can choose, as I would, to be independent. A European nation, a European nation. UK government to negotiate and agree the transfer of power that would put beyond doubt the Scottish Parliament's right to legislate for a referendum on independence. Together with the constitutional and democratic case for that transfer of power, we are also publishing the draft legislation that would give effect to that. Of course, I anticipate that in the short term we will simply hear a restatement of the UK government's opposition. But they should be under no illusion that that will be an end of the matter. We will continue to pursue the democratic case.
Democratic. Are we just going to pretend that the SNP have stayed neutral up until this point in relation to trying to stop Brexit? Ranging as far back as before Article 50 was ever activated to begin with, Thin Lips was threatening legal action, proclaiming that Scotland had the ability to veto or block the process. Then swiftly after the 2017 general election, where they lost a third of their seats, they told the electorate that independence was going to be put on the back burner, which, looking back in hindsight, was just an excuse to completely stop talking about it. As they then went on to argue for several people's votes, participated in making sure no deal was removed from the equation, voting down everything possible, participating in the court cases, trying everything humanely possible to stop Brexit. And they've got the audacity to now stand there and talk about the democratic rights of Scotland. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There isn't much difference between Thin Lips and the likes of Gina Miller and Joe Swinson, with the only real differences being that they've remained relatively upfront about their desire to stop Brexit. But Thin Lips gets to hide behind the facade of independence. Thin Lips gets to hide behind the facade of acting on behalf of the majority of Scotland, without even having the decency to call it how it is. This has nothing to do with independence. This is a campaign to attempt to rejoin Europe, masquerading as independence. And the events on display are exactly as I said they would be. Take this video for example. This idea of requiring permission removes responsibility and redirects the blame elsewhere. So if they're unable to fulfill this promise, they essentially get to walk away from it all scot-free. Pardon my non-intentional pun. Voting for them in this election will not do a damn thing apart from ensure that they retain and obtain power. I mean, think about it. Just think about it. You all vote for Thin Lips. They then obtain a majority again, only to see their request denied. The SNP would then have the power that they were initially after, while the anger generated from heartbroken promises and deceit are redirected down south towards Westminster. The argument over Scottish independence will not be settled anytime soon. Thin Lips will not stop pursuing her case, no matter how many times she's rebuffed by Westminster. And she clearly believes that if she keeps arguing that Scotland's democratic voice has been ignored, she will build the case in voters' minds, not just for another vote, but for independence itself. The longer she has to wait, the more convinced she is that she will win. Well, if she's allowed to continue operating the way that she has been up until now, I'm pretty sure she will win. The pro-independence SNP, quote-unquote independence, won a landslide in Scotland in the general election, while the Conservatives lost 7 of their 13 seats north of the border. Despite winning a big majority across the UK as a whole, and in spite of all that, parties that are in favour of the Union still managed to get 55% of the electorate vote. And that is in the face of thin lips gallivanting around the country with their cringy Stop Brexit bus, reminding onlookers to vote tactically, to vote SNP to lock the Tories out of Downing Street, whilst appearing in interviews to reassure no voters and those that are undecided that if they wish to stop Brexit, they need to vote SNP. It wasn't a vote for independence. Where we heard that shit before. Taking every possible opportunity to grandstand about how Scotland had one real Remain party, and it was the SNP, not the Lib Dems. As well as implying that if they were to obtain a majority in the upcoming election, it would bring about IndyRef 2. So surprise, surprise, they go and win a majority of seats. And what's the first thing Thin Lips does? Goes back on the reassurances that she gave to no voters and those undecided. Completely erased every single conflicting policy and proposal that she'd been talking about up until that point, and all of a sudden proclaimed that she had a mandate, and the majority in question indicated people wanted to remain in Europe. As I've said before, this is all a smokescreen. This is all a smokescreen. Because at the end of the day, their mandate from 2016 specifically requires Brexit to occur. And because they have chosen, up until this point, to prioritise stopping Brexit for the whole of the UK, they now run the risk of being held accountable for why Scotland may not see an independence referendum anytime soon. All they had to do was allow the process to run its course. Wait for the circumstantial change. Instead of that, they're now requesting a referendum, or the right to a referendum, proclaiming that it's up to Scotland to decide Scotland's future, etc, etc. The only reason Scotland hasn't had its right to choose its future via IndyRef quote-unquote 2 is because of the SNP's determination to stop Brexit. Nationhood is more than just a matter of history or a set of national institutions. It is also about shared values and aspirations, and follows from the idea of the people of Scotland as a distinct political community. The people of Scotland are a political community now, apparently. First I fucking heard. However, south of the border and here as well, that have participated in trying to stop Brexit are, as far as I'm concerned, completely and utterly treacherous. Their actions reprehensible. At least they've been relatively upfront. Thin Lips just can't stop fucking lying. A material change of circumstances since 2014, and the government has a new electoral mandate to hold a referendum on independence. This material change of circumstances is based on the prospect of Scotland leaving the EU against its will, and what EU exit has revealed about Scotland's position within the UK. Here we go again. Of course, what she's referring to in this regard is the fact that they put forth a proposal and it was rejected. Scotland's place in Europe was a major issue during the 2014 referendum campaign. The Scottish Government's policy was that an independent Scotland should continue as a member of the EU. The Scottish Government's policy was argued that one of the benefits of independence was a stronger guarantee of continued participation in the EU. That's not quite true though, is it, Thin Lips? The Scottish Government at the time, yourself and Alex Salmond, both proclaimed that we would inherit the UK's membership. That was a lie, wasn't it? Trust. Those against independence argued that there was no threat to Scotland's place in Europe from a vote to stay in the UK, knowing full well that David Cameron, who'd announced months earlier, the same year, that there would potentially be, that if he was to be re-elected, there would be potentially an EU referendum by the end of 2017. SNP just going to pretend that that didn't occur. Of course they're going to pretend that didn't occur because the rewritten history that Thin Lips has benefited from for the best part of 2 to 3 years is exactly why we're in the position we're in. By surprise, David Cameron was elected. So following a commitment in the 2015 Conservative Party manifesto, the UK Government Parliament legislated for a referendum to be held. The EU referendum was held on the 23rd of June 2016 in Scotland. 62% of voters supported remaining in the EU, with the majority for Remain in every Scottish council area. Because Nicola Thinlips told independence supporters that the premise for independence would not arise if they voted to leave the European Union, so naturally that swayed the vote. No mention of that though, of course. The Scottish Government accepted the result of the referendum. Well, that's a lie. Though the First Minister committed to exploring options to give effect to the votes of the people of Scotland that she had coerced, and to give the people of Scotland a choice over their future. The Scottish Parliament endorsed this approach, and in 2017 it mandated the government to seek an agreement with the UK government for an independence referendum at the time to be determined by the Parliament. As I've said before, if the mandate from 2016 had seen their criteria met and the UK government was standing in the way of our ability to hold a referendum, that would be a different story. But the fact of the matter is, as I said, this is a smokescreen to distract from the fact that the only reason that Scotland up until this point hasn't seen the independence referendum that Thinlips has continuously tossed into the equation every time there was an election upcoming up until this point is because of the prioritisation of stopping Brexit for the whole of the UK. Something that has showcased their hypocrisy up until this point. The rejection on display, as far as I can tell, is in relation to their referendum bill. Completely different entity in its entirety to that of the referendum that they would legally be able to hold if they had met said criteria. The Scottish Government is clear that its preference is for a referendum to be held in 2020, allowing in the event of a vote for independence the smoothest transition to an independent Scotland, taking its place as a member state of Europe. There would be clear advantages in Scotland being able to make a decision about its future as an independent country in Europe before any process of divergence between UK and EU law had begun. Failing again to address the fact that Scotland would have to leave the European Union in order to rejoin it. Probably more importantly is the fact that the claims of Scotland's right to choose and putting Scotland's future in Scotland's hands, etc., is completely and utterly disingenuous. Already demonstrated in her deciding what would happen to Scotland in the event of obtaining independence from the UK. This is an EU membership campaign masquerading as independence. And speaking about independence, an interview with Thinlips, who set out her vision for an independent Scotland and its role within the EU, with the warning that she opposes the more radical aspects of greater political union brewing within the Brussels bloc, and that she won't sign up fully to demand for greater political convergence within the Brussels bloc. Either we would be rejected from re-entering Europe, or she would comply. Take your pick. But there are other things that are sometimes argued for by people like Macron and others, which I'm not supportive of. They would include the French president's desire for greater military integration, including a real European army and a shift away from NATO. Nations are committed to closer union, and the SNP has faced criticism over the proposals to leave a political union with the rest of the UK to provide Edinburgh with greater sovereignty, only to hand this back to Brussels. Branded this a false comparison, insisting the EU states are all independent countries with control over key levers of economic and political control to make their own choices, within reason. But she does accept the need for greater EU collaboration to tackle major issues. That's why Thinlips decided to acknowledge that there is push for closer political and military integration. If I had to guess, I'd probably assume that she'd give off the impression she wouldn't accept any of the radical aspects that she claims to oppose, just to keep the people on side long enough, only for her to accept it all. Can only be one of two things. Either she accepts it all, or she won't get in.